Good morning, class. I hope you guys all had a great Memorial Day weekend. I was able to get to the Catskills and do some fly fishing with my husband, which was great to actually get out of the North Country while keeping social distancing. We were just at a camp, and I think we saw one other person. So last week we talked about the difference between renewable. We introduced you guys to the difference between renewable and non-renewable resources. Something you guys definitely went over last year in seventh grade. Renewable resources can replenish naturally. However, they can become non-renewable if we overuse them. Like if we cut down too many trees and don't allow them to grow back. If we overfish and the fish population can't grow back. So there's a fine line. Renewable resources, while renewable, can become non-renewable. Some non-renewable resources are usually, when we talk about non-renewable resources, we're talking about fossil fuels, and they cause a lot of pollution problems with them. And once they're used up, they're gone. Some effects we know about: smog formation, algae blooms, which are those big green gunky gunk it looks like. It's actually algae, and it increases in numbers because there's actually pollutants in the water, and it's like more food for algae. So it's actually a sign of pollution. CFCs, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and then just general global climate change. So here's a picture of an algae bloom. That means that there is a pollution nutrient problem. Quick note, I'm at my parents' house, which is a farm, and they're working on machinery outside. So if you hear some noise, that is what it is. All right, so I'm going to try to go through this quickly. My goal is to stay within 5 minutes for you guys. So let's get through this. So biodiversity is talking about any variety of life on Earth, variety of species, variety of ecosystems, variety of communities, food webs. All that variety provides us with resources. So we want biodiversity. Provide us with the foods we eat, industrial products, clothing, shelter, wood, medicines. The rainforest is the main area we get a lot of our medicines from, and is the main area that is destroyed and is being reduced at an alarming rate. Oxygen, we need trees to breathe. And then beauty inspiration. We have a lot of natural or state parks and national parks preserving these unique and precious ecosystems and sceneries. So we're going to talk about 4 major threats to biodiversity. So let's take a look. The first one is called habitat alteration and fragmentation. Anytime there is development for farming, for roads, for cities, towns, it chops up the land for organisms, which puts them in little chunks, little islands, and reduces their habitat. And that can lead to a decrease in their numbers. Demand for wildlife. Humans have caused extinctions by hunting them for food and other products. So here we have some tiger skins. Here we have some ivory from elephants. We're in what's known as the fifth mass extinction, directly caused by humans, whether it's directly hunting them or destroying their habitat. Pollution. We know that, right? Humans cause a ton of pollution: air pollution, water pollution, land pollution. One huge concern with pollution is when that pollution can accumulate in the tissues of organisms, and it accumulates higher up the food chain, and that's called biological magnification. So for example, the bald eagle almost became extinct due to DDT, which was an insecticide, and bald eagles are at the top of the food chain. When this chemical was in high numbers in their tissues, their babies. It directly affected the eggshell of their babies. So the babies were being hatched prematurely and not living. And that is why they became almost extinct. So DDT has been banned, and the bald eagles have thus recovered and are in good numbers right now. And then introduced species. These are your invasive species. I'm sure some of you have heard about the invasive species of zebra mussels in the St. Lawrence River right next door. And then we have plant species that also are known as invasive species. The problem with invasive species is they don't have any predators. So they can keep growing in numbers and usually cause problems in areas. There's something called the carrying capacity for every ecosystem. Carrying capacity is the number of species that an ecosystem can support. We thought the human carrying capacity would have been reached already, but we keep increasing in numbers and haven't had great catastrophes yet. We will get there. Um, for a lot of other species, that number, the carrying capacity is a lot lower. So there you go. The four again are habitat alteration and fragmentation, demand for wildlife, pollution, and introduced species or invasive species. The ozone depletion is just giving an example of harmful CFCs, which were used in refrigerator coolants. It destroyed parts of the ozone layer, and we need the ozone layer because it protects us from harmful UV radiation, which leads to cancer. So we have, here's the hole. So it's showing in the 1980s into the early 2000s. Increasing in that hole has thus reduced. And then global warming, just some effects of global warming. Sea levels may rise because the ice caps are melting. More droughts. Organisms may become threatened, like polar bears in sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. Our polar bears up in our, God, you guys, sorry, I cannot think right now. So we have the Arctic, sorry. And then ecosystems become at risk, decrease in medicines. We talked about the rainforests and a decrease, therefore a decrease of our foods, our crops. The last thing I want to go over, two things, and then I will be done. Ecosystems provide services that we probably never even thought about, such as, well, we've thought about, but we didn't really think about them as ecological services that could eventually maybe not be there in the future. Solar energy, we can't really affect the sun, so solar energy will still be there, but solar energy is an ecosystem service. Production of oxygen, there are plants for that. Storage and recycling of crops, regulation of climate, storage and distribution of fresh water, food production, nursery habitats for wildlife, detoxification of human industrial waste. Wetlands are huge for this. And then natural pest and disease control. Conservation means, you've heard probably of conservation efforts, and that is just wise management of natural resources and protecting entire ecosystems or protecting maybe a single species. And a lot of the times, the areas that are most affected or have the most endangered species are usually in third world countries. And so there's a lot of challenges because they use the land specifically in order to survive. What they're doing is because they need to do it to survive. So it's really hard for people to change their ways, and you need to have solid research to convince them to do something different. So those special areas where conservation efforts are more directed, it's for some areas, are called hotspots. So they're in areas where there's 90% loss of habitat already. We need to understand how the organisms use that habitat in order to manage those areas, balancing a demand for the resources that the people are using there, and planning for a sustainable future. So you focus in at the hotspot, and then there's a next zone around it, kind of the buffer zone before you hit into people's needs. So here's a map of just showing you, you'll see where these areas are. All right, so not sure on the time because I can't see it as I'm recording. You guys will fill out a Google form with this, and then the rest of the week, I'm going to do an assignment for tomorrow where you guys are going to be focusing on some threats to ecosystems by humans that will be due on Friday. All right, so I hope you guys have a great day. It's supposed to be a hot one. Goodbye.